In early August 2016, 3 months before the election, a courier arrived at the White House with an envelope for the president.
It has top secret markings. This is highly classified material with additional handling instructions that are pretty extraordinary. In this case, this material was only to be shared with 4 officials in the White House: President Obama and 3 of his top aides.
Inside was a report from John Brennan, the director of the CIA.
It's drawing on intelligence from sources deep inside the Russian government, and it is revealing that Putin, the president, Russia's president, is directly involved in running this operation against the United States. The intel goes one step farther, however, and speaks to the intent. It conveys Putin's instructions to his intelligence services that this operation's intent or objective is to try to damage Hillary Clinton and to try to help Donald Trump.
The CIA director was convinced that this was as close to smoking gun evidence that the CIA ever gets.
And there was this realization, oh my God, they're really trying to disrupt something here.
For months, U.S. intelligence agencies had suspected Russia of trying to interfere in the election.
We have new details now on that email hack at the DNC.
The latest emails released by WikiLeaks suggest that top officials at the Democratic National Committee plan to undermine Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign.
Bombshell revelations about how the Democratic National Committee does business.
This comes at a time when the first big WikiLeaks dump had already happened. It had already created a whole bunch of turmoil in the Democratic Party. But there was still a lot of mystery about what was the game here, what was the end game for Russia.
Moscow's intentions now seemed clear. The orders had come from Putin himself.
It's extraordinarily rare to get Putin's fingerprints on anything. He's a former KGB officer. He takes extraordinary precautions to protect himself from surveillance. He rarely engages in communications over cell phones or computer. He conducts most sensitive Kremlin business from deep inside secure facilities at the Kremlin.
The White House was deeply divided over how to respond. Some officials pushed for strong retaliation, but their plans went nowhere.
They felt a sense of frustration that as they were working on these options, they were getting pushed up, sent up to the higher levels of the White House, and could never get any sense that the options were being actually received or were going to be acted on. As one person told me, it was like a black hole.
For Obama and his senior aides, aggressive action risked a dangerous escalation.
They worried that Russia would then take much more seriously its any intention to go after voting systems. They basically ended up feeling they were in a game of chicken with Moscow on this, and they didn't want to carry that game to a devastating conclusion.
It was one thing for them to steal derogatory emails and release them, leak them to WikiLeaks. It would be another thing for them to penetrate voting systems and actually try to discredit the outcome of the election itself.
The administration issued a series of private warnings to Russia.
The most serious one comes in September, when Obama and Putin attend a global conference in China. And Obama uses this meeting as a chance to pull Putin aside. It's just the two of them. Obama confronts Putin, says, "This has to stop. We take this very seriously, and there will be consequences if you carry forward here." The final one is actually delivered through a very secret channel that was created to avert a nuclear exchange. It's a sensitive communication system that the U.S. sent a message through saying, "Election's coming, leave it alone."
In early September, officials went to Capitol Hill to make the case for a bipartisan statement on Russian interference.
Democrats are adamant that this is necessary. We have to call out the Russians. You have to confront them. You have to stop this. Republicans are less interested in that. They are arguing, no, you will be doing Russia's work for them. And some senior Republicans, including the Senate Majority Leader McConnell, go even further and express skepticism about the intelligence case.
McConnell's pushback had a very large impact on the White House. To them, that was an indication that no matter what they did in this space, they were going to be accused by McConnell and other Republicans of basically trying to politicize the intelligence.
On October 7th, the intelligence community publicly accused Russia of trying to interfere in the election, but Trump drew his own conclusions.
She has no idea whether it's Russia, China, or anybody else.
I am not quoting myself.
No idea.
I am quoting
Hillary, you
17.
have no idea.
17 do you doubt 17
our
military
has
and
no
civilian
idea.
agencies? Well,
yeah,
he'd
I doubt
rather
it.
believe
I doubt it.
Vladimir Putin than the military and civilian intelligence professionals who are sworn to protect us.
It dismayed people in the White House and in the intelligence community that you could have a candidate who could so willfully ignore Russia's aggression.
But tempering that alarm was a widely held belief in Washington, the belief that Trump couldn't win.
I think it's really important, as we look back on this timeline here, to keep in mind that there was an assumption inside the White House, on Capitol Hill, among news organizations, frankly, that Clinton was going to win. It would almost be like, a third term for the Obama team. There would be plenty of time to deal with Russia once that outcome was secured, once Clinton's victory was secured.
There you have it, folks. History made here in the early morning hours of November 9th, 2016.
Secretary Clinton has conceded to Donald Trump.
A political earthquake, a come-from-behind story for the ages.
What started off as unlikely, impossible, is now reality.
It was a shock to the White House.
People kind of walking around in a daze, like a funeral parlor.
Obviously, when Trump wins, the Obama people realize that the next president may be disinclined to basically follow through on aggressive steps to try to punish the Russians.
And it lends this new urgency to trying to figure out, well, what did happen? What did we just witness here? What was Russia's role?
The administration sort of doubled down and realized it needed to not only call out Russia, but at this point it needed to take some actions. It needed to hold Russia accountable and try to prevent a repeat occurrence.
All these ideas that had been kicked around before the election are put back on the table. They basically cross all the most severe options off the list. And we're not going to dump a bunch of embarrassing stuff about Putin out there. We're not going to go after sector-wide sanctions.
In one of his last news conferences, Obama defended his decision not to reveal more or do more about Russian interference.
At a time when anything that was said by me or anybody in the White House would immediately be seen through a partisan lens, I wanted to make sure that everybody understood we were playing this thing straight.
On December 29th, almost 5 months after he first learned of Putin's plans, Obama took action.
The Obama White House now imposing sanctions and naming names.
Some Russian agents will have to leave the U.S. in 72 hours.
Some are calling it a parting shot at Russian President Vladimir Putin just weeks before President Obama leaves office.
President Obama says all Americans should be alarmed by Russian interference in the election.
The expulsions of 35 Russians in the United States and the closure of 2 Russian-owned compounds in the United States are ideas that have nothing to do with the election. Those are ideas that had been under consideration for months and months prior to the campaign.
Critics, including some within the administration itself, people who had worked on the packages of response options, felt that these were too little too late. And as a result, Russia has been emboldened, in their view, to continue to do what it did and to try it elsewhere, including in Europe.
But in his statement on the sanctions, the president hinted at more severe, more secretive measures.
There's a lot of criticism of the measures that Obama announces, but there's a hidden other component of these punitive measures that were not part of the public rollout. What it ends up doing is it involves turning to the CIA, the NSA, US Cyber Command, gives them instructions basically to embark on a long-term effort to identify vulnerabilities in Russian infrastructure and networks.
The idea here was that they could be sort of like remote control time bombs or bombs that could be triggered at a later date if and when, let's say, Russia tried to interfere in another US election, or maybe hacked into a power grid and tried to disrupt it.
These are new kinds of weapons for a new kind of war. Whether or not to use them will be a decision for President Trump. His views on what happened last year are still unknown.
Finally, a yes or no answer. Does President Trump believe that the Russian government interfered in the 2016 elections?
I think I have not sat down and talked to him about that specific thing. Obviously, we've been dealing with a lot of other issues today.
It's such an odd thing in some ways that Obama is essentially creating this weapon for future use by a successor, and that successor is Trump, whose relationship with Russia and the complications surrounding that are part of the mess here to begin with.